It's time for Formula One to return back to Europe for the 10th round of the 2024 Formula One season, and the travelling circus returns to a circuit known by teams and fans alike. We're back in Barcelona for the Spanish Grand Prix, and the first of three. It's a triple header as the season starts to ramp up. Well, there's been plenty of news going on off track as well, so let's get to that and the Grand Prix itself. And I'm delighted to have Philip Clearen with us and making his debut. Yes, a new face, a new voice for us. Ben Hunt is here as well. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Bryn.
Thank you very much indeed. Very kind of you to invite me on today.
Well, it's our pleasure, I think. We'll find out in due course, of course. Now, let's get straight to all the news. I mean, I've got quite a lot of news to get through. And this is a big exclusive story that John Noble wrote, actually, on our very own Autosport.com. This is understanding that Alpine may be dropping their engine program for 2026 and looking for a new engine supplier. This is ahead of the new regulations, of course. How has it gotten to this stage for Alpine, gents? Who wants to come on this? Maybe Phil start? How has it got to this stage and where do they go from here?
How did it get to this stage? I suppose if they need a new engine, that means that their 2026 engine was not very good, was it? So otherwise they wouldn't have done so. Obviously, it's a massive investment to build these engines. So if you already know you're going to be on the back foot, then it doesn't, I suppose, make a lot of sense to keep going and keep pouring millions into it. If you by regulation, they can get another engine from one of the different manufacturers. So yeah, it's just one of those things where things just don't seem to be working very well at Alpine. We've long heard about this difficulty working together between the French and English factories, the chassis and so on, and the power unit in France in Viry-Châtillon. And I suppose if you want to save the program and you don't think the engine is going to be any good, then you might want to just focus on the chassis side on one factory and then just bring in a customer engine. And we've seen with McLaren that you can be competitive with, for example, a Mercedes supply in the back. So.
Dropping an engine program, though, Ben, it's quite an extreme move, especially this far out from 2026.
Yeah, it just feeds into the general picture of chaos, doesn't it, at Alpine at the moment? Everything's going wrong. Disgruntled drivers, even the Le Mans project backfiring as it did. Lots of problems. A wider issue with the brand identity as to Alpine itself. Lots going on. Lots of people being made redundant, experienced staff. It's not a very happy ship, it seems. To cut their losses now at this point is, you could argue it's wise to do it now before they start spending any money, as Philip said. But of course, the difficulty is now finding a replacement. Who are they going to go with? The rules. I read John's piece and I was bamboozled by the equation, which obviously dictates as to what the current suppliers have to do and what they're responsible for. So, it's looking like Honda would be potentially a smart choice, but Mercedes would also be an option, providing Mercedes say that they're able to do so. I think it's just a difficult prospect for the team to be going into, a new set of regulations with so much uncertainty. It doesn't help the chassis side, what's going on in the UK, not knowing what's going on in France.
Yeah, the equation is very, very tricky to get your head around. If you haven't read the article just yet, go to autosport.com and have a look, and then prepare to have your mind blown. I think I went cross-eyed about 4 times. They crossed and uncrossed. It was like a scene from a film I won't mention. totally undifferent.
Basically, the gist of it is, with Alpine as a manufacturer, a power unit manufacturer, the maximum supply of power units is 3 per manufacturer. But if they drop out, that goes to 4. So, for example, Mercedes, they're at 3 now. They could go to 4 if Alpine drop out. So, basically, every manufacturer is on the table in theory.
Yeah, and thank you very much for clarifying that, because it's one of these things that if Alpine drop out, then the minimum number goes up, and therefore Mercedes could, in theory, be supplying 4 teams, including themselves, to 2026, which would be, well, a coup for them, wouldn't it? They'd be making a nice return on that, I'm sure. So the thought process is Honda or Mercedes if Alpine do decide to go down this route. Is that where we're going, Ben?
I think that's probably the logical choice, yeah. There's a little bit of unknown, isn't there, over Red Bull's engine department. At least you've got a known quantity in Honda and definitely Mercedes. So I think Mercedes would be their preferred choice. We know from history, that they work very hard, and their engine division is obviously very up to speed. We saw what happened with the change of regulations last time, so it makes a lot of sense for them to go down that route.
Yeah. Now, another story that has come out that I think has been whetting the appetite of many is this super license story. Now, this is, the FIA has announced changes to the super license system. Potentially, and it's very much potentially, granting a super license to 17-year-olds. Now, there are some stipulations that they must show, and I'm going to read this so I get it right. Exceptional maturity in single-seater junior racing. That's quite a vague,
yes,
isn't it? It's quite a vague ruling just there. But this could let Kimi Antonelli into a Formula One car immediately rather than waiting for his 18th birthday in September. So what are your thoughts on the changes, and what are our thoughts on this wording? Start with you, Ben.
It's typical, isn't it? The ambiguity with the wording. It kind of gives everyone a little bit of an exit or an entrance into a Formula One, depending on how the FIA see fit. I think it needs tidying up, doesn't it? That phrase. In terms of the general picture of Antonelli, for me, the bigger issue is where this pressure has come from. No one's willing to put their hand up and say, it was us, we wanted the rules changed because of this. And of course, it's only a couple of months away anyway, so it's quite a strange timing for it to be done. I remember there were rumours around the Miami Grand Prix that it may have been Williams, it may have been Mercedes. We still don't know at this stage. And as I say, we've only got a couple of months to his birthday anyway, and I don't know if it looks like he's going to be replacing anyone soon anyway, given what's going on next year. So, quite a strange decision to do so. The FA didn't make a song and dance about it. They changed the rules quietly, didn't tell anyone. And, as usual, we found out, and, people started putting bits together and making stories of it.
Phil, it would be interesting, though, because it does potentially open the door to someone like Antonelli stepping into a Formula One car before his birthday. There are quite a few Grand Prix before his birthday in September.
Potentially. I mean, Mercedes have always said, we have no interest in letting Antonelli drive in F1 before his 18th birthday. He needs to focus on F2. Doesn't mean he can't do an FP1 session, but then at the same time, every race before his 18th birthday is an F2 weekend as well. So do you want him to do both at the same time? I'm not sure. And it's the ball in Mercedes' camp. He's their driver, and they can decide if they are going to use this clause at all or not.
Yeah, it's their ball, isn't it? And they'll do with it as they please, Ben.
Yeah, it's also up to, strange what Williams want to do, because if they were interested in taking him in, football term, on loan like they did with George, it's difficult to see what they would gain in such a short amount of space, between now and the end of the season, potentially as a replacement for Logan Sargent. So, they don't really want to be doing that prep work for Mercedes, do they? They want to be thinking of the long-term future of their own team. So I'm not too sure of the thinking behind it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you say, it's so soon between now and his birthday, so maybe it's a story that's developed that doesn't really mean much to many people. But let's watch this space, as we always have to do. Now, driver market is something that dominated our earlier podcasts and videos earlier in the season. It's sort of dipped away a little bit in more recent times, but Valtteri Bottas has said that he's confident that he's going to stay in Formula One in 2025. He could stay at Kick Sauber. There's maybe the possibility of going off to Williams. Where do we see him going, or where do you guys see him going, and where do you think he should go? Maybe that's a different question, Phil.
It's a difficult one, because it seems like he's not the first choice at any of the outfits that are available. I mean, he's been in talks with Alpine, with Williams. Obviously, Haas has a seat in theory, and he could still remain at Sauber and Audi if they don't get to land Sainz. But it seems like Sainz is the first option everywhere. So he doesn't seem to have his own destiny in his own hands at this point. So where should he go? It really depends on what Carlos Sainz does. He gets to decide between Williams and Sauber. So I imagine Valtteri will be slotting in wherever Sainz doesn't go.
Yeah, I agree with Phil. I think that Sainz is the big piece in that jigsaw. Once he makes up his mind, I think then everyone else has to fall into line. I think Valtteri probably would fancy a go at Williams, wouldn't he, from what we're hearing about the Mercedes engine for 26, and obviously be quite fitting to come full circle back to the team he started with. I think that would probably be his dream scenario, but like we say, it kind of depends on what Carlos Sainz does.
Yeah, the problem here is just that you don't know. Like, you don't know who's going to be good in 26. So it's all about whispers and just confidence in the people that are building the projects and the power units. And clearly, the fact that Carlos still hasn't signed for Sauber suggests that he's not entirely convinced that that's the way to go. And if you look at Sauber this year and how they're performing, it's easy to see why Williams seem to be in more of an upwards trajectory compared to them. And the Audi power unit, another question mark. If you go with Williams and their Mercedes engines, that is probably a question mark that you can eliminate, because they'll probably be right there with all the experience that they have. So it seems like Carlos should probably go for Williams, in my opinion. And then, Valtteri, either he gets a say, or do you want to go to Alpine with everything that's going on there? That's, Esteban Ocon didn't want to be there. That's pretty obvious. So, that's not the most attractive option either, it seems.
We are getting ready for this Spanish Grand Prix. It would be the right time, wouldn't it, for Carlos Sainz to be making his announcement? It would be the perfect time. Are you both expecting to hear something over the coming days of Carlos saying, right, I've signed for X?
This season, I have learned to expect the unexpected. I think that we can never take anything for granted, given that, the start of the year that we've had and everything that's gone on. To answer your question, no, I'm not expecting an announcement this weekend, as much as I'd like one. I still think that there's some legs in this. He can drag it out for as long as he wants. He's got the contract on the table. He's got to decide, weigh it up. Just because we want it done doesn't mean that he has to feel like he has to get it done. He's got lots of things to consider. The only thing I would say is that obviously, he kind of needs a good weekend. If we're talking about the Spanish Grand Prix, after a disappointing race in Canada. So I'm looking forward to seeing how he bounces back, and Ferrari as a whole as well, which I'm sure we'll come on to.
Yeah, we certainly shall. We'll be hitting up everything about this, the Grand Prix, in just a few moments. One more quick story, though, and that is the release of a new Formula One film, currently untitled, but they've got a year and 6 days to get that done, haven't they? 25th of June, 2025, it comes out here in Europe, then 2 days later in North America. What do we think of that film? Is it going to have the same sort of impact as Drive to Survive? It's got Brad Pitt in it, and I think Lewis Hamilton's chucked some money at it as well, hasn't he?
Definitely Lewis is going to be a major driving force behind that. I don't know if Brad Pitt will, he will help too. He's Brad Pitt, obviously. Being an F1 driver in his 50s, I've got my questions about that. But anyway, I think Lewis being there will help both with the promotion, because he's obviously by far the biggest, presence in sort of world culture, if you want to call it that, as a 7-time world champion, and everything he does outside of racing. It will help. Will it be like Drive to Survive? I doubt it, because I think Drive to Survive did a lot of the hard work, a lot of heavy lifting. But it is going to help, obviously. It's going to sort of follow up on that. And we'll see. I think the good thing with Lewis being involved is that hopefully it will be a bit more authentic than some of the other offerings we've seen in the past. And not to mention, well, I'm going to mention Driven, who's obviously very, very poor, and I think we have a chance of having something that both casual fans and maybe sort of diehard F1 and motor racing fans can both be semi-happy with, which I think is a very hard ask.
Plenty of time, though, isn't there, to get the popcorn all, in the pan and all warmed up and stuff, though. It's, ages away. So, a lot can happen between now and a release date in a year's time.
I was interested in Formula One driver in his 50s, so there's still chance, right? That's what I'm clinging on to. No, joking aside, I think it's pretty good. Formula One has to roll the dice and try something new. Personally, I feel that the Netflix cycle has kind of run its course. It was very good during lockdown. It's transformed the sport phenomenally. Look, we're seeing sellouts, and obviously more people wanting to come to races, and more races wanting to be on the calendar, and it's kind of night and day difference since that started. So that's very positive, but you've got to try something new, and I think that I'm very interested in seeing how this film goes. Phil mentioned the authenticity, which is obviously what Lewis is going to bring to it. A bit of money, but he's also involved in the script, I think, as well, to try and make it as realistic as possible. They keep talking about the cinematography element, and obviously they're drawing on the expertise they had in Top Gun and promising a better production than that. So if it has half the impact that Top Gun had, in the cinemas and box offices, then that's good for Formula One. It's interesting as well from a Formula One point of view that they're now engaging in a different audience and a different circle, working with Apple. It kind of brings new experience to them as well. So, I think it's a positive step, and I look forward to seeing it coming out.
Absolutely right. Get your tickets. Not yet. It's way too early. Now then, let's turn our attention to the Grand Prix itself. This is right up your street, Phil, because it's not that far from you, although we all know that the circuit in Barcelona is not that near to the city centre itself. It's a bit of a trek out the way there, but it's a very familiar circuit. It's more conventional than the street circuits you've had of late. What do we think? Is this going to be the biggest or clearest indication of upgrades in more recent times? Is it going to kind of sort out the playing field, going to put people where we think they should be, Phil?
I would say so. I mean, conventional circuit, if you look at the calendar these days, what is a conventional circuit, right? Because what used to be an outlier in Monaco, now we have a lot of outliers, streets, circuits, bumpy circuits. So it's true that we had a run of 4 sort of difficult circuits for Red Bull, for example, with how bumpy and how much they were struggling in the low speed section. So coming back to Barcelona, sort of the tried and tested proving ground for F1. Winter testing used to be here. Everybody knows it very well. It is going to be a good test because it will challenge teams' cars in every way. High downforce, low speed. It's got a bit of everything, doesn't it? And I think it will be a good indication of where things really are for the next couple of races, because you've got Silverstone coming up, the Red Bull Ring, Spa, so you've got more sort of high speed and high downforce circuits there. So I do think, for example, Red Bull will be a lot stronger here than they have been in the past couple of races, which is maybe a bit worrying because they won 2 of them despite struggling. So is it still going to be a 4-horse race like we saw earlier on? I'm not sure. I think a team like McLaren will be quite excited to come here. Ferrari had a shocker, obviously, in Canada, which I think is very much a one-off, so I wouldn't be too worried about them just yet. And then Mercedes, they had a good one there, but they will have to confirm their step forward on a very different circuit now. So a lot of question marks, I would say. I'm still banking on Red Bull to come back quite strong, but behind that, it's a bit too close to call.
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of a Grand Prix at a test track, isn't it, really? It's, all the drivers know it so well, teams know it so well. It's quite a good opportunity to work as a benchmark to see just how good the upgrades are, and we'll have a clearer picture, probably a clearer picture for the first time this season, just into the pecking order. It'd be nice to see where Mercedes are. There was a bit of a feeling that they made a revival in Montreal, but then we have seen some false dawns before, so it'd be interesting to see if they can consolidate that improvement. For me, the Ferrari interest is key here. They had a setback. It was kind of the Ferrari of old in Canada, littered with mistakes and problems, and it'll be interesting to see after their wave of optimism whether they're able to bounce back. And I think that's what I'm really quite keen to see this weekend. The Red Bull issue is a concern. Are they going to run off into the distance? We'll see. But like Phil, I'm also optimistic that other teams can sort of take the challenge to Max and Red Bull and fight for wins.
Let's just stick with a couple of teams, work through one by one, really, because McLaren are looking really, really strong. They had an upgrade package that they were a bit confused about. It seemed to be giving them better performance than they were expecting. What do we think that they'll be able to bring to Barcelona? What do you think they'll be leaving with on Sunday evening? Smiley faces or frowns? Because it is going the right way for them. What overriding thoughts? And are they going to be bringing any more upgrades to Catalonia, Phil?
I think there were some small bits, but nothing as life-changing as the upgrades that they've had in the past. Well, if you look at last year, McLaren were one of the best teams in high downforce corners that Barcelona has a lot of. So that will probably still be true this time. The upgrades that they have brought performance everywhere, so that's a good sign. Especially in the low speed, I think you were alluding to it bringing a bit more than expected. That was especially the low speed, which has been their weakness for a couple of years now across different cars. Yeah, I don't know. I'm expecting quite a lot from McLaren. I know they had a tough time here last year. It was obviously with their old car before all the upgrades. I think they will be pretty good. If I had to bank on one team to take the fight to Red Bull, it'd probably be McLaren.
I agree. Driver dynamic as well is also quite important, I think. You've got two drivers working together there, haven't you? Pushing that team forward. So, for me, that is quite a positive place at the moment. Everything that they've worked on and all the upgrades that they've brought so far have worked. I think that they have reason to be optimistic coming into this weekend. And I am of the opinion that they will be happy leaving on Sunday.
And they are saying they've got to grips with the upgrades. They understood kind of why now, a bit more understanding of why they were getting the improved performance as well. Let's just turn our attention then to Mercedes, because they actually had a good result last time out and they are looking like they've turned the corner and at decent pace as well. New front wing, the upgrade there, is that going to keep them in the hunt, do we think, or is it going to be others around them will start to perform better at a circuit that's maybe more conducive to their upgrades they brought earlier in the season?
Yeah, I think it's difficult to say. As I mentioned before, I think that we've seen the false dawn in Canada before. I can't remember, 2 years ago maybe, when they got a good result and everyone was, well, maybe this is it, this is the turning point. But of course then it didn't materialise. So, I'm a little bit cautious to think that maybe they have turned the corner, but it would obviously be a good sign if they have. And as I say, this offers a benchmark. If they are good here, then they have reason to be optimistic going forward.
Yeah, I agree. They have had so many turning points that it's kind of hard to believe them at their word before we see some more evidence across different circuits. But they seem to be pretty confident, Mercedes, that it is going to stand them in good stead on the right variety of circuits. Obviously, a different front wing concept that allows it to flex a little bit more, obviously within the rules, but every team is sort of trying to get front wings that flex a little bit within the margins of what's allowed, just to have performance in different conditions and less drag on the straight, more downforce in the corners. That should help them with their balance as well. That's sort of what teams are chasing with these cars now. And if that works, then it should work in different corner types. So it should work on different circuits.
For me, also, driver dynamic is key this weekend as well. Lots of opinions on the internet about Lewis's performance in Canada. Question marks about whether he's checked out. He's obviously done that deal with Ferrari and maybe he's looking elsewhere already. I personally don't believe that to be the case, but it will be interesting to see just how he goes up against George. George has obviously, found a new level, and obviously he's confident at the moment. So seeing that dynamic play out between the two of them would be key as well for this weekend.
Yeah, and it's on a circuit as well that they did really well at, Mercedes, last season. They got their 2 podiums. That's an amazing result for them. Red Bull finished first and fourth, Perez being the one that finished in fourth place.
Yeah, Ben, it's interesting because obviously Lewis quite well from your time covering him in particular. And his comments were quite interesting in Canada, weren't they? Saying he doesn't expect to outqualify George this year. Do you think there's some sort of, how shall I say, that he's going to be paranoid almost about what's going to happen?
I think not paranoid, but Lewis now finds himself in a unique position. He is kind of the outsider in his own team, isn't he? He's kind of made that decision to leave. He's subsequently being cut out of meetings for 25 and onwards, and he is he's an outsider, and I think that's something new for him to contend with. There was the comments after the wing that George got in Monaco, which kind of set the ball rolling, and then a little bit disgruntled in Canada and a few mistakes, and I can see why people are saying this. It'd be really interesting to boil down on just what's going on. I just think it's a case of being unfamiliar. Maybe Mercedes are now dialing the car more towards George, knowing that he's the future. And that's why I'm saying the dynamic is going to be interesting. At the start of the year, there's lots of positivity. I want to finish the year with a bang. Doesn't seem like that's coming, does it, in terms of wins? They're getting closer, but it hasn't come yet. And it's probably a little bit of frustration and sort of just seeing out his time with Mercedes. It almost feels like he's kind of handed his notice in and, he's clock watching almost, it's getting closer to Friday, 5 o'clock, and he's ready to head off for a new job. So that's kind of, for me, how it feels. He's definitely quick enough. He's still got the ability. It'd be silly to suggest otherwise. So it's just going through the motions. I think this is the end of the, Lewis at Ferrari. Lewis at Mercedes. This is the end of Lewis at Mercedes, and obviously we've got a new chapter with Ferrari in the pipeline. So it's perfectly normal transition. But with that, there is going to be some sort of separation between Mercedes and Lewis.
He's been around for such a long time as well, though, hasn't he, now that he's so mature, so experienced, and he doesn't seem to get quite so frustrated at these moments. So if it's not working for him this season at Mercedes, and it's not going great, obviously, but it's signs of improvement, maybe he'll be quite philosophical on his approach and say, well, I'm moving off to pastures new next year with maybe even a new engineer alongside. We shall have to wait and see on that one. Let's keep stirring that pot. The team we are all talking about, Ferrari, though, they had an absolute shocker. You did touch on it, Ben. An absolute shocker last time out. You think it's very much going to be a one-off. So do we expect to see Ferrari back at the top, at the sharp end?
Yeah, I think it was a timely reminder, isn't it? Sometimes those things are good. If you're at the top of your game and then you have an absolute shocker, it's a reminder to think, hang on a minute, we can't get complacent. We haven't cured all our problems. The big issue for me is whether Ferrari address those and look back into why they made those strategy calls with Charles. Carlos was a little bit unlucky with his accident, but so long as they learn from those mistakes and move forward, that is always the key. If they're able to do so and they can show us that they can do so this weekend, then yeah, great. Let's start banging that Ferrari drum again.
Yeah, to me, what happened in the race, if it's not all that important to me, because obviously Charles had an engine problem that cost him so much time. His race was ruined anyway. Carlos as well made contact at the start with I don't remember who it was a Sauber, wasn't it, or a Haas? So his race was compromised as well. So for me, the problem was more what happened in qualifying, being so far off. And with the grid as close as it is now, that it's not a matter of losing 2 or 3 positions. You're just out in Q1 or Q2 if you don't get it right. Ask Checo Perez, right? So, it's more about have they completely understood what happened there. I think it was something along the lines of tyre pressures being quietly a little bit off, a little bit too low for the conditions and the circuit. So if that's the case, then it is a one-off. But it is a good reminder, as you said, that you need to get everything right when the grid is this tight. You need to get strategy, pit stops, setup, just trackside operations, your drivers, everything needs to be spotless if you want to have a chance. And that is something that Fred Vassar actually has repeated at pains this year in every session, in every media session that he's done. So I think towards his team, this would also be a good wake-up call or a big reminder to Maranello. This is the perfect example of why they need to get everything right if they want to have any chance against Red Bull.
And it's a season, it's a race, in fact, where last year Charles Leclerc qualified 19th. And if you look at the Constructors' Championship over the end of the season, it was 3 points in it. So, it comes down to fine margins, and I'm sure Fred Vasseur will be looking at that. Ferrari do have this amazing ability, as we know, and I do love Ferrari, but it's an amazing ability to grab defeat from the jaws of success, don't they? So they'll be very eager, I'm sure, to right the wrongs of the last one and get on with it. But it does look like maybe that is where they're going to go. Max Verstappen, he qualified on pole. He led every single lap of the race last year. Sergio Perez qualified 11th. He needs that. This is all last year, obviously. So this year, Perez definitely needs to change what's happening. He needs to change this narrative that we always talk about. And I'm not going to start banging on the drum of Perez and Red Bull right now. We just have to wait and see what they're going to do. But it is an important opportunity, I think, for Perez to start performing and to get those wheels back on and facing the right way. Well, we'll talk about wheels. Tyres then. We're going to have the C1s to C3s, the hardest compounds. What are we expecting? 2 stops? Fingers crossed, 2 stops, guys? What are we thinking?
I would say so.
Yeah, that could liven things up, couldn't it? I think that it's kind of a track which takes out because they know it so well. It's kind of it dials some of the fun out, doesn't it? So I think that we're hoping that strategy would obviously play a part, and I think 2 stops is probably the logical choice.
Yeah, it's just a circuit that's so hard on its tyres. If you look at turn 3, the long right-hander, full throttle, that is taking a lot out of the left-hand side tyres, and then with the change to the track that they made a few years ago, they restored the old final sector with those very fast sweeping right-handers, and again, lots of load on the left-hand side tyre. So, definitely a 2-stopper, I would say. And yeah, different compounds than the last couple of races. Again, this will be another variable that teams will need to get on top of.
Yeah, more stops the better, I say. Maybe not more. We'll cap it at 2. 12 stop
As long
races.
as it's not a one-stopper, it's fine by me.
Exactly that. Okay, wild prediction times then. I'm going to do something different. Sometimes, Ben, and you are new to this, I'll throw out either a position and say who's going to finish there. I'll ask about where a driver might finish. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you both, and I'll start with Phil, seeing as he's kind of done this before. Phil, last season, Lewis Hamilton finished 2nd. George Russell finished 3rd. Where will they finish this season in Spain?
Ooh, that is a tricky one because it's just so close. Well, I said McLaren are my favourites behind Red Bull, so I'm gonna logically have to put them off the podium, I'm afraid. Yeah, how about Lewis bouncing back strongly and finishing ahead of George this time? So I'm gonna go P4 and P6 for Lewis and George.
Okay, Ben?
Yeah, that kind of makes sense. I'm not disagreeing with him. I think that Mercedes is kind of an interesting prospect, as I've mentioned before. I would like to see them back in the hunt, fighting for podiums.
So maybe one of those Mercedes drivers. You're not going any further than that, though, Ben. You're just going to say one of the drivers on the podium. Okay,
well, I will make a prediction. I will say Lewis. Part of that is kind of knowing him, for a number of years, and obviously he performs best when the heat's on him, and I think that he's kind of almost built himself up into this, kind of a mindset that he needs to start delivering. He's kind of thought that, okay, well, George is always going to beat me in qualifying. I really need to up my game, and it kind of lights a fire underneath himself to sort of do even better. So I think that he's kind of got that hunger to, prove himself wrong almost, and his naysayers. So yeah, let's go with Lewis.
Excellent. And I'm not going to say I wasn't going to go down the Sergio Perez route, but I'm just going to ask one. It's a yes-no. That's all I want from you two on this one here. Will Sergio Perez get a decent points haul? Do you think he's going to get back on the wagon and start performing this time out in Spain? Phil, yes or no?
I mean, it's a low bar, isn't it?
He couldn't do it.
To score points.
Is he going to finish inside the top 4? Let's say that.
He better.
No.
Oh, okay, there we go. Look, the pressure is on. I mean, he's got a new contract, I suppose, as well. So we will keep our eyes on it. And I actually hope he does do really well, because I think that Sergio Perez is a good enough driver for us to stop pointing the finger out all the time. He just needs to start proving it. Gents, thank you very much indeed. We shall see what Spain, Barcelona throws at us this weekend. But as always, thanks very much for joining me. Well, there you go. That just about does it for our Spanish Grand Prix preview. What will happen? Let us know in the comments your predictions ahead of Barcelona. Will it be a return to dominance for Red Bull, or will the chasing pack continue to hunt them down? If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date with all your Formula One coverage. But until next time, thanks for watching.